Well, I'm going to make a song to start with, one of Richard's favourite way of starting. It was a song released in 1995 by a singer called Joan. I don't know if you remember it, some of you. It was called One of Us. One of Us. If you're interested, it's on YouTube, and it's had, I can't believe this, 128 million listens. That's a lot, isn't it? Imagine one of our sermons having 128 million listens. Anyway, the song explores the idea of God as an ordinary person and invites the listeners to reflect on faith, on empathy, on the human experience in general. Its central message asks the listeners to imagine God as a relatable, everyday person. What if God was one of us? What if God was one of us? It challenges this traditional view that some people have that God is distant and unreachable. And the opening verse asks, if God had a name, what would it be? And if you call it to his face, and would you call it to his face? And if you were faced with him in all his glory, what would you ask if you had just one question? Similar things, similar questions must have gone through your mind. They must have done. If you had one question to ask God, what would it be? If God was in front of you, robed in majesty, do you think that you'd even have the audacity to speak his name? Indeed, if God had a name, what would it be? Well, we've been sharing over recent months what are known as the I am statements of Jesus. And we come here tonight in this passage in John 18. And as I said, it'll be the final I am passage we're looking at. And we're confronted with a scene where Jesus is arrested. And it's happening on the lead up to the crucifixion on a Roman cross. It's recorded, the same account is recorded in all four Gospels. And they all tell a similar story. There's differences, of course. Similar story. But John's version has a certain feel to it, a certain focus to it. And it's like that because we're meant to pick up on the authority and the power with which Jesus, in obedience to his Father, now surrenders himself to the hands of men. It's with Jesus' power and authority we're meant to see. And John's brief account focuses on the moments where Jesus most certainly manifests his glory and his power. The truth is that Jesus is both someone who is one of us, as the song says, one of us, and is relatable, but also he is at the same time the majestic God, the powerful God. And John wants us to understand and make it obvious that Jesus is completely in control of the scene here. He came for a specific purpose. At the point where we see Jesus arrested and his fate sealed, it seems that evil had won. It seems that evil had taken charge. But it was far from the case. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. So our first thought is it looks like defeat. It looks like defeat. After all, we're talking about the arrest of Jesus, the God-man. And we know where it all leads. It all leads to Calvary. Jesus dying on the cross, no less. For quite some time leading up to this point, the Jews became very upset with Jesus. They were getting more and more angry at what he was saying and what he did. For them, you see, a Messiah was on his way. Someone who would restore the nation of Israel back. But they were convinced it wasn't Jesus in their eyes. They were under this Roman occupation. They were under the control of the mighty Roman Empire. And they believed that this long-awaited Messiah will be the one to overthrow the Romans, get rid of them. And they were convinced it wasn't Jesus. And every time there was a report of a miracle, or a report of somebody following Jesus as a result, the Jewish leaders became even more enraged with him. And so here we are, with Jesus and the disciples. They're in an olive grove, in a garden, and it was night. They didn't have nice, warm, comfy, soft beds to sleep in. They were probably outside in the open air, under the stars. And like the Jewish leaders, Judas, as one of the disciples, well, he decided to betray Jesus and sell him out. In return for some money, Judas gives away the information of where Jesus is, where the group was resting. He sold him out. And Judas was not pleasant. He was a thief. He was a betrayer. And his problem, though, was just like the Jewish leaders. They didn't trust Jesus. Not really. He was disillusioned with Jesus' methods. He was unconvinced about him being the Messiah. And if you notice here, John, he can't help but make clear that Judas is a betrayer and a traitor. He makes it really clear. John's account here, Judas is a crucial part of the story, but it's reduced down to the essential. Go into loads of detail about Judas, just the basics. You don't want to make a big deal about Judas. He's the betrayer. He deserves to be forgotten. So John plays it down, but he gives us the basics. And this whole scene, however, just looks like a defeat from one angle. Because Jesus is betrayed by one of his own disciples betrays him. It also looks like a defeat because of the way that Jesus was arrested. The arrest is made by a detachment of soldiers and some some Jewish officials, from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They're carrying torches, they're carrying weapons. They meant business. If the disciples are going to put up a fight, well, the Jewish leaders are prepared for them. They're ready for a fight. They're ready for arresting them. Can you imagine an armed group of men knocking on your door this evening at night time when you're in bed? A group of police or a group of thugs, and they've got weapons and they're banging on your door. They're coming to get you. They're not knocking on your door for a nice cuddle, are they? They're not going to say something nice to you and give you a little prize, a little chat. They meant business. They were there with weapons. And ordinarily, therefore, it just looked like a defeat for Jesus and his followers straight away. Physically, they weren't going to win this battle. But then, in addition, we read that Peter saw it as a defeat as well. He simply just couldn't allow himself to let this arrest happen. Not to his Lord. No, you're not taking Jesus. And Peter drew his sword, and he thought, this moment's come now for fighting. It was time to physically take on the enemy. And in true Peter style, he jumped straight in, without thinking, and he hacks off this guy's ear. Wallop. Oh. And John even tells us his name, Malchus. No one else tells us his name, just John. So Malch, as I like to call him, gets his ear lopped off. Chopped off in this kerfuffle. It looks like defeat. So then, this detachment of soldiers and Jewish leaders, this wider posse, arrest Jesus. The disciples are dispersed, and Jesus is taken into custody. He's bound. Where do they think he's going to go? How do you think he's going to run off? Anyway, they bind him, they arrest him. It all looks like defeat. Our second point, however, is when we read this account in more detail, we start to realize that Jesus actually surrendered in power. He surrendered in power. He wasn't arrested against his will. He wasn't taken in defeat, but he goes into custody under his own volition. He's decided what's going to happen. John keeps underlining this in his account. He's underlining how Jesus is in control of the scene. It is one of the most important scenes in history where man arrests God. So John is keen that we don't lose sight of what really is going on here. God is in control of this scene. Firstly, verse 4 tells us that Jesus knew what was going to happen to him. He had purposefully gone to Jerusalem, knowing this would take place. He had already predicted his death. We can turn a few pages back and you can see it all in John. He had predicted he would be lifted up. He predicted he would be betrayed. And now it's happening. Now it's underway. And as the detachment of soldiers arrived, Jesus doesn't run away. Nor does he slip away into the olive grove safely. He's not hiding behind the trees. He takes the initiative and he goes to meet them. In his great power, he meets the foe. He meets the enemy. Then he asks them who they're looking for. Who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth, they say. I am he, says Jesus. In the account here, notice that John doesn't pick up on that kiss, the betrayal of the kiss by Judas. Judas is pushed to the back. See, John is making clear that Jesus volunteers who he is. He wasn't keeping it a secret. The time had come. And for John, who writes this, evil betrayal isn't allowed to have the upper hand. No. It's not going to have the upper hand in this account. The initiative is taken by Jesus. Did you notice that? Now, this particular phrase is used by Jesus to identify that he is Jesus of Nazareth. He says, I am. This I am statement. I am he, says Jesus. Say, well, it's me, you've got me. I am Jesus of Nazareth, you've caught me. Or he doesn't say, you're looking at him. Rather, he uses the Old Testament name for God in his response. I think it's remarkable, he says that. I am he. It's remarkable because he's saying to his own creation, to those whom he had made, to those who he knew how many hairs are on their head. And in their successful attempt to arrest him, he says, I am God. And therefore the Son of Man, the second person of the Holy Trinity, the God-man, allows himself to be arrested, knowing all that was to come, knowing all that was to follow. He goes through it all for you and for me. And he goes through it all because he knows that it's the only way which he can save us from our sin and its consequences. Jesus knows he must face the cross. He must face death. In suffering the wrath of God that stands against us because of our sin, because of our disordered lives, he knows he must face the agony of the crucifixion. But there's something more here. If you notice when he says, I am he, we read that those that had come to arrest him drew back and fell to the ground. He says, I am he. They drew back and fell to the ground. As he surrendered to them, the great power of God was displayed, if only for a relatively small but significant time, in a significant way. He doesn't injure those that fall back. I assume that they were under orders to arrest him. He doesn't kill them. He doesn't injure them. They fall back with the power of God. But the very words of Jesus do this. The very words underlined who he is to these men who went to arrest him. Now, this isn't the first time that we encounter such a thing. Back in John chapter 7, we read about where the chief priests and the Pharisees questioned the temple guard for not having arrested Jesus. They're saying, why didn't you arrest him? And these temple guard, they say to the chief priests and the Pharisees, no one ever spoke like this man does. It's like they couldn't arrest him. They were struck how he spoke. It took them aback. So much so that they sort of disobeyed orders. They went back empty-handed. They'd been disarmed by Jesus, by his words, and he sent them home without an arrest. And here we are in the olive grove. And in specific response to the I am statement of Jesus, they fall back. Jesus displays that power. His power over the forces that stand against him. Well, did they fall back into space? Was it like a physical falling back onto the ground? Or was there also a sense in which they fell back in their spirits, in their hearts, in their souls? They recognized they were dealing with somebody special, perhaps. Perhaps it was more than just physical. We're not told that, but can you imagine going to arrest Jesus? And his words, and they sink into your heart. Surely as they went to arrest him, this man of infinite power, the God-man, surely in a profound way, those words hit home. They hit home in their hearts. They're met with raw, holy power in simple words. See, these men that went to arrest him, they must have been terrified, really. Terrified of who they met. It must have been terrifying to know you're on the wrong side. What am I doing? And the glory of the Saviour was displayed only briefly. And it was enough to knock them off their feet, to knock them back. There are times for many of us, when we first comprehend who really is, we're knocked backwards in our spirits, in our hearts, in our minds. We're knocked backwards with the power of God. We realize how sinful we are. We realize who he is. But the good news is we don't need to stay there. He'll hear our cries for mercy if we would just come to him, and he'll restore us back to himself. Jesus has power over the evil in this world. We read about it so many times. Even the words of Jesus in John 14, verse 30, we see that the prince of this world is coming, but he has no hold over me, says Jesus. You see, Jesus was predicting his time will be short now. It will be coming to a close. It will come to a head. But the evil one had no power over Jesus. None whatsoever. He goes on to say that he's going to do what the Father has commanded him. You see, we need to take seriously here what John's saying. We need to take on board this passage. Jesus is not taken by surprise. And he's not overpowered in his arrest. He allows it to happen. He submits to it in obedience to the Father. He's determined it's going to happen. This is an account of the Son of God, out of love for you and obedience to the Father, willingly surrendering. Surrendering in great power. It's heavenly restrained power, but it's power. He allows himself to be taken to the cross. Finally, the point is that in this account we see how clearly he saves his people. He saves people. We see the very nature of God at work here. Even in this dreadful situation, what looks to some like defeat, the desire of Jesus is to save, and to provide, and to heal. So, for example, we can turn to the way in which he deals with them that were coming to find him. How he asks them who they want. They want Jesus of Nazareth, of course. But Jesus knows that their problem is with him. First and foremost. That's their problem. They want Jesus. And he teases it out straight away. Their argument, you see, is not really with the disciples. Not really. Their argument is with Jesus. And Jesus, in control of the scene, makes the point of saying, who is it you want? And they say twice, Jesus of Nazareth. He underlines it, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus makes the case for letting his disciples go free. Let them go free. And he's promised the Father that he'd lose not one of them. Of all those given to them, he'd not lose one. And I'm just presuming here that if the disciples had been forced to stand trial with Jesus, they'd have failed him. We don't know that. But he makes sure that they're set free. Perhaps they would have abandoned their Lord at that point. Perhaps they would have disowned him. Therefore, Jesus negotiates their release. Isn't that just, again, remarkable that Jesus does this? You see, Jesus has promised that he'll not lose any that belong to him. That includes you. And it includes me. We can trust him as Saviour and Lord, the great shepherd of his sheep. He knows what we can cope with. He knows the path that is set for us. And he's in control. He's in ultimate control. He's not going to lose you. Next we see the saving and restoring work of Jesus, most clearly following this interaction between Peter and Malchus. We're aware from other accounts that Jesus immediately and miraculously heals this man's ear. He wouldn't let this incident with Peter be tainted with this bloodshed. He's not leading a physical rebellion against the Romans. He's not promoting a riot. He's not wanting a fight to break out. Not at all. His mission was to face down the power of evil and hell and to face the wrath of God on the cross that stood against the people, stood against me and you. So instead of approving of Peter's actions, Jesus says, put that sword away. You see, Jesus knew he had to face death on the cross. And he says to Peter, shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? Shall I not drink it? What are you playing at, Peter? And he knew full well that holding this armed rebellion in his name would only lead to a different and infinitely less suitable outcome. Perhaps it would have never meant going to the cross. And when Jesus talks about taking the cup, he's meaning the cup of suffering. He's meaning death on the cross, facing the very wrath of God that stood against us. If a different route had been taken, could we ever been put right before a holy God? No, it had to happen. Jesus had to go to the cross. God came in the person of his Son. He came as the God-man. And he came to drink the cup of suffering to save his people from their sins. So instead of the armed rebellion, Jesus is led away alone with a detachment of soldiers. Jesus is not departing because of a human betrayal of Judas. That's just part of it. He's not going because of the superior might of his enemy. He has the power to lay down his life and take it up again. No one takes it from him. No one overpowers him like this unless he allows it. And what he does, and he suffers, was for the love and the obedience to his Father. He surrenders his life for the sake of his own. He suffers the cross for you. So to conclude, a song of Joan Osborne. What if you could ask God just one question? What would it be? We know that God has a name, and he became one. We know it was Jesus. We know how he acted. We know how he loved his own. So what would your question be? It has to be whether he's going to save you too. It's got to be that question. What else can you ask him? The question has to be whether this great God, the maker of heaven and earth, will be willing to save you. To all that is, he will. Oh, he will. The one who referred to himself as I am he is indeed the one who you can turn to tonight. He's the one who came to save you too. Can I plead with you that you do that? Can I plead with you that you turn to Christ? Don't let the moment pass. Sometimes there are events in life that look like defeat, but they turn out to be the very opposite. Perhaps you feel defeated tonight. Perhaps something has made you just feel, I've had enough, I'm defeated, I've had enough, I'm defeated. Well, it's a good place to be before God. Absolutely. You just need to rely on him, rely on his grace, because he is more than sufficient to take it forward. You've nothing to offer him, good. You can only cry out to him, good, do that. You can't bring anything anyway. Only your sin. That's all you can bring to him. Turn to him. Place your sin at his feet, as it were, in prayer, and ask him to take it away. And he'll do just that. He'll do just that. Turn to the I am. Turn to the God-man who came into this world as a person. You can know him. Turn to him. Amen.